My mom accidentally sent me her will. Growing up with a single mom and 3 siblings wasn't easy. My mom worked tirelessly to keep us afloat, and I respected her for that. She juggled 4 kids, bills, and life's challenges as best as she could. I knew it wasn't an easy feat, so I gave her credit where it was due. I cut her more slack than perhaps she deserved, often forgiving the ways she fell short. But as time went on, it became clear I had a specific role in our family. I was the expendable child. My value seemed tied not to my presence or my efforts, but to how much money I could provide to support her. It wasn't just implied, it was expected. I was the one who helped financially, the one who was supposed to step up whenever the need arose. I resented this expectation, but I bit my tongue for years, telling myself that helping her was the right thing to do. Still, the weight of being treated as nothing more than a resource took its toll. The more I gave, the more it seemed she expected, and the less I felt seen or valued as a person. Things reached a breaking point when something devastating happened in my life. A personal tragedy that left me broken and vulnerable. In that moment, I needed my family, but they abandoned me without hesitation. Their lack of support cut deeply. I would never have turned my back on them, yet that's exactly what they did to me. That betrayal led to an estrangement. I distanced myself from all of them, unwilling to keep pouring into a family that had shown they wouldn't be there for me when it mattered most. The separation grew so wide that I didn't even know my brother had 2 children until much later. It hurt, but I started to rebuild my life on my own terms. However, the scars of those years, the neglect, the expectations, the abandonment, never fully healed. As the years went by, my mom began to age, and her health started to decline. She became a burden to my siblings, who had no issue complaining about it, but weren't above taking full advantage of her financially. They drained her bank and retirement accounts, ran up her credit cards, and treated her more like an ATM than a parent. That was their relationship, transactional, selfish, and one-sided. Then came the requests. My siblings started asking me to step back into the picture and help out with my mom's care. Doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, walks, all the tasks they didn't want to handle. I knew what this was. They wanted me to take on the responsibilities they were too busy or too lazy to manage, freeing them up to keep milking her finances. I told my mom outright that I wouldn't do it for free. I wasn't going to spend my time, energy, or money helping her when she was still paying their bills and handing them cash. Her response was simple: "Don't worry. You'll be taken care of after I'm gone. I'm leaving you a lot of money in my will." I didn't trust her promise. It felt hollow. Another attempt to manipulate me into doing what she wanted. Over email, I pressed her, asking for proof. "If I'm really a beneficiary, then I should have a copy of the will," I said. She hesitated, but eventually sent me a document. To my shock and fury, the will excluded me entirely. The truth was clear. The whole setup had been a scam, a ploy to trick me into taking care of her so my siblings could continue benefiting financially. They'd free up their time, save money, and leave me holding the bag, all while my mom funneled her resources to them. I couldn't believe the audacity. How could a parent ask one child to step up, knowing they were excluded from any inheritance, just so the others, who weren't lifting a finger, could get a bigger slice of what was left? I confronted her about it, anger boiling over as I laid everything out. I told her I wasn't mad about being excluded from her will. She didn't know me anything financially, but I was furious about the deceit, the way she tried to manipulate me into shouldering a burden while rewarding my siblings' greed. I made it clear that I owed her nothing. Whatever she thought she was entitled to, whatever loyalty she believed I owed her, was gone. She had broken any remaining trust between us. It's been 3 months since that conversation. She hasn't reached out, and I haven't either. The silence says it all. Sometimes I wonder if she even realizes how much damage she's done, not just with the will, but with years of favoritism and neglect. I've made peace with the fact that I'll never get the apology or acknowledgement I deserve. At the end of the day, I'm not angry about the money. I'm angry about the betrayal, the way she valued my siblings' greed over my time, my care, and my presence. And that's a wound that will likely never heal. One mistake, and now I'm married. 4 years into dating my girlfriend, I wanted to do something special for her on Valentine's Day. We had shared so many wonderful memories together, and I felt like this was the perfect time to show her how much I appreciated her. I decided on a thoughtful gift, a beautiful ring I found at an antique store. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it had a vintage charm that reminded me of her. The ring cost $500, a significant splurge for me at the time. I wasn't planning anything grand or symbolic. It was simply meant to be a token of my love, a reminder of how much she meant to me. I imagined the look on her face when she opened the little bag, and I felt confident it would make her smile. That evening, I took her to one of our favorite restaurants. It was cozy, romantic, and perfect for the occasion. As we sat down, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small gift bag, and handed it to her. I didn't say anything, just smiled as she looked at me with curiosity and opened it. The moment she saw the ring, her eyes widened, and she let out a gasp. "Oh my God, yes!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Before I could process what was happening, the waiter appeared with complimentary champagne, and the entire restaurant broke into applause. I froze. It was like the world had shifted in an instant, and I was completely unprepared. My mind raced, trying to piece together what had just unfolded. She thought I was proposing. She thought this was an engagement ring. She was already calling her mother from the table, her voice bubbling with joy as she shared the news. Everyone around us seemed to be celebrating, and I sat there, stunned and unsure of what to do. Should I correct her? Should I explain that it wasn't a proposal? But the look on her face, her pure happiness, kept me silent. I was completely shell-shocked, unable to wrap my head around how a simple Valentine's gift had turned into a life-changing moment. For the next couple of weeks, I lived in a state of quiet disbelief. The words engaged and fiancé felt foreign, almost surreal, yet I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I kept telling myself it wasn't the right time, that I'd explain the misunderstanding eventually, but as time passed, I realized that her happiness was more important than my confusion. So, I decided to roll with it. After all, I loved her, and even if this wasn't how I'd imagined proposing, maybe it was meant to happen this way. Several months later, we stood together at the altar, surrounded by friends and family, and said our vows. For the next 15 years, our life together was filled with love, laughter, and the occasional joke about our proposal. My wife loved sharing the story with her friends, though she would always tease me about how I didn't say a single word when I proposed. She'd laugh and say, "Can you believe he was silent? Not a single romantic speech." I would always respond with a sly smile, joking that my silence was the most poetic proposal of all time, because no words could capture the depth of my love for her. For years, I planned to take the truth of that night to my grave. I thought that revealing the real story would only hurt her, that it might tarnish a memory she cherished so much. But a few months ago, in a rare moment of honesty, I decided to share what had really happened that Valentine's evening. It wasn't easy to admit. I told her how I had simply intended to give her a thoughtful gift, how I was too stunned to correct her when she misinterpreted the moment. I explained how the restaurant's applause and her overwhelming joy had left me speechless. She listened quietly, her expression a mix of surprise and hurt. She was clearly miffed, and I could tell the revelation stung a little. But as the story sunk in, she softened. It was a bittersweet moment, one where we both laughed and felt a little emotional about how far we'd come. Looking back, I realized that ring was unmistakably an engagement ring. I didn't see it at the time, but its design, its delicate beauty, it was perfect for the occasion. Though I would never have chosen such a small diamond for a proposal, I rectified that soon after. Just a few months into our engagement, I upgraded the diamond to something more modern and appropriate. Now, after 15+ years of marriage, I can say with certainty that it was the best mistake I ever made. Life has a funny way of surprising us, of turning the unexpected into something beautiful. Our marriage has been filled with ups and downs like any other, but it's been a journey I wouldn't trade for anything. That Valentine's night, I wasn't planning on proposing, but somehow, in the chaos and the unexpected joy of the moment, I stumbled into something perfect, and I'm grateful every day for the life we've built together. starting with a $500 ring and a misunderstanding that turned into a lifetime of love.
My husband is obsessed with another woman. I've been with my husband for over 10 years, 3 of those as a married couple. We share a life together, a home, careers we worked hard for, and our beautiful 1.5-year-old daughter. On the surface, it seemed like everything we had dreamed of was finally falling into place. But all of that came crashing down the night of our daughter's birthday party. It should have been a joyous occasion, a day to celebrate the little person we brought into this world. Instead, it became the day I discovered the truth. My husband had been secretly obsessed with his high school ex-girlfriend for the entirety of our relationship. It didn't stop there. He admitted that she had visited from France a few weeks earlier, and during that time, he kissed her. He wasn't just reminiscing about an old flame, he was planning to leave me and our daughter to be with her. Plane tickets, a new life in France, he had it all mapped out. The only thing that stopped him was a panic attack while trying to book the flights. That moment of intense anxiety made him realize he was making a mistake. He called it an epiphany, but to me, it felt like our entire relationship hinged on something as fragile and uncontrollable as a panic attack. In the weeks following his confession, he tried to make things right through what felt like textbook love bombing. Flowers, sweet words, unexpected gestures of affection, all the things that might have made me swoon in the past now felt hollow. I couldn't bring myself to respond in kind. It wasn't intentional. I'm naturally an affectionate person, but something inside me had changed. The warmth I used to feel when he looked at me was replaced by a cold, unfamiliar distance. I couldn't fake it, and eventually, he noticed. The man who had just confessed to betraying me had the audacity to complain about our lackluster life, as if everything could just go back to normal. I felt like I was living with a stranger, or worse, a roommate. The person I thought I knew, the person I trusted to build a life with, suddenly felt like someone I didn't recognize. What stung the most was the timing. We had spent years building the life we always talked about. We both worked hard to earn our degrees, landed stable jobs, and bought a house in the city we had dreamed of living in. And, of course, we had our daughter, the brightest light in my life. We had finally arrived at this picture-perfect version of life we had once envisioned. And just when it seemed like everything was falling into place, I learned that he had been carrying this obsession for years. Not just during our marriage, not just since our daughter was born, but even before we started dating. He hadn't dealt with it, hadn't sought closure, and instead let it fester, hiding it beneath the surface of our relationship. It felt like a betrayal of everything we had worked for and everything I had sacrificed to support him. I told him he needed therapy, not just for his panic attacks, but to figure out why he let this obsession consume him for so long. He's gone to therapy before, so I know he's capable of seeking help. But this time, he hasn't even tried. It's like he wants to sweep everything under the rug and pretend nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, I'm left trying to figure out if I even want to love him again. I know that, if I chose to, I could try. I could force myself to stay, to work through the pain, and to rebuild what he broke. I could try to fall back in love with him. But the question that keeps haunting me is, do I want to? It's not just about forgiveness. It's about whether I can trust him again, whether I can look at him without remembering the betrayal, whether I can ever feel like we're equals in this relationship. I've poured so much of myself into this marriage. I've loved him, supported him, and made countless compromises for the sake of our relationship. And yet, he held on to a piece of his past so tightly that it almost destroyed everything we built together. I've had people try to blame me for what happened, suggesting that I somehow drove him to this. Let me be clear, his obsession with her predates me. It's not my fault, and I refuse to shoulder that blame. Right now, I feel like I'm at a crossroads. The path forward is unclear, and I don't know which way to turn. All I know is that I'm tired of trying to make sense of something that feels so senseless, tired of carrying the weight of his mistakes, and tired of questioning whether the love we shared was ever real. If you've been in my shoes, or if you have any insight, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just please, don't be cruel. I'm barely holding it together as it is.
Should I crash her wedding? It all started when I met Megan at 17. At first, she was just a friend, someone I saw at gatherings, laughed with, and shared inside jokes. It wasn't until I turned 18 that I realized how much she meant to me. Slowly, quietly, I fell in love with her. For 2 years, I kept those feelings locked away. She was too important to me as a friend, and I was terrified of ruining what we had. But love has a way of seeping through the cracks. By the time I turned 20, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I confessed, not knowing what to expect. To my astonishment, she felt the same. We dated for 2 incredible years. It was the kind of love that people write songs about. Intense, passionate, all-consuming. I adored her, and she adored me. But like all good stories, ours wasn't perfect. As much as we loved each other, there was an undercurrent of tension we couldn't escape. Megan is fiercely independent. When she's upset, she needs space to process her emotions. I'm the opposite. When I'm mad, I need to talk it out immediately, no matter how messy it gets. Our differences in communication turned minor disagreements into major conflicts. I couldn't handle her silence, so I'd push, escalate, and provoke, hoping she'd finally engage. She wouldn't. It was exhausting, for both of us. I realized I had put her on a pedestal, expecting her to fill a void she never could. She needed space to be herself, and I needed reassurance she couldn't give. It wasn't healthy, and we both knew it. When she got a job offer in New York after graduation, it was the final push. We both agreed that long distance would only prolong the inevitable. Our breakup was mutual, but it felt like my heart had been ripped out. I drove her to the airport, said goodbye, and watched the love of my life disappear. We decided to cut ties completely. No calls, no texts, no social media. It was the only way to move on. 2 years later, I had rebuilt my life. I was in law school, dating casually, and trying to move forward. Then, one day, while walking through Hyde Park, I saw her. It was like time stood still. She looked different. Her hair was back to its natural brown. Her style had changed, but she was still Megan, the same radiant, captivating person I had fallen for all those years ago. She recognized me immediately, and we ended up grabbing coffee. For 2 hours, we talked about everything. Her life in America, my law school journey, mutual friends, old jokes. It felt like no time had passed, but it also felt like everything had changed. By the end of that coffee, I knew one thing for sure. I still loved her. Over the months, we began to reconnect. She unblocked me. I unblocked her, and we started hanging out. But it wasn't long before I learned about Mark, her fiancé. She met him in America, and within a year, he proposed. The more I got to know him, the more I disliked him. With Megan, he was polite, attentive, and charming. But when she wasn't around, he was loud, arrogant, and dismissive. I couldn't understand what she saw in him. Still, I tried to respect her choice. I even met him a few times, each encounter solidifying my belief that he wasn't right for her. Megan deserved someone who truly saw her, who matched her strength and independence. Someone who loved her as deeply as I did. The breaking point came at a friend's housewarming party in October. Megan got tipsy, and I offered to drive her home. Sitting in the car outside her house, we had a conversation that's been playing in my mind ever since. She said she hated coming home to an empty house. I asked where Mark was, and she brushed it off. He was watching football at the pub. The conversation turned deeper, more vulnerable, and at one point, she hinted that if I had asked her to leave Mark, she might have. But I didn't. I couldn't. 2 weeks later, I found out her wedding was just days away. I tried to reach her, but she was already at the remote cabin where the ceremony would take place, out of cell service. I was running out of time. Now, here I am, standing at a crossroads. If I leave tonight, I can make it to her wedding by morning. I don't even know what I'd say, but I can't let her marry someone who doesn't deserve her without telling her how I feel. Even if she rejects me, at least I'll know I tried. I'd rather lose her again than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. So, I'm going. I have to.
Dating a psychopath, my boyfriend's shocking confession. I've been with my boyfriend for 6 months, and before that, we were part of the same friend group for 3. When we first got together, everything seemed perfect. He's gorgeous, intelligent, witty, and charismatic, the kind of person who naturally draws others in. I fell for him quickly, unable to resist his charm. He wasn't at all what I would have expected from someone diagnosed as a psychopath. The word conjures up images of cold, calculating people, but he's not like that, at least, not on the surface. If you'd asked me before this week, I'd have said he was just a little emotionally distant at times, but nothing unusual. Sure, there were moments when I felt like he didn't fully connect with me emotionally. When I pointed out something he'd done that upset me, he would amend his behavior, but it felt like he was doing it out of obligation rather than genuine care. I chalked it up to personality differences, and I didn't dwell on it. But then something happened that made me question everything. 2 nights ago, I went with him to a work event, and for the first time, I saw a side of him I didn't recognize. He was completely different, a chameleon. He laughed at jokes I was certain he'd normally find offensive, passionately discussed topics he didn't care about, and seamlessly became the person everyone in the room wanted him to be. I stood there in awe, watching him transform. It wasn't just adapting to the social setting, it was as though he had become an entirely new person. On the drive back to my place, I asked him about it. He dismissed my observations, insisting he had acted normally. It felt like gaslighting, and I didn't appreciate it. For the first time, I didn't invite him in, making it clear I was upset. He didn't reach out for 2 days. When he finally showed up at my door, he insisted we talk. What he told me next left me floored. He admitted he was a diagnosed psychopath. At first, I laughed, thinking it was a bizarre joke. But he wasn't joking. He had brought proof, medical documents, test results, and diagnoses. I stared at the papers, overwhelmed. He explained that people like him are incredibly skilled at adapting to social situations. He masks his true self, becoming whoever he needs to be to gain approval or further his goals. That's why he's so well liked at work and why he's been promoted so quickly. He screens people to decide if they're worth keeping in his life, and if they aren't, he drops them without a second thought. I asked him why he had chosen me to be his girlfriend. His answer was unnervingly straightforward. I'm at a point in my life where I think I should have a girlfriend, probably one I'll marry. I knew you for 3 months and I liked you enough, so I picked you. Picked me? Like a choice on a menu? He explained the moment he picked me. We were walking back to my place, and I made a joke he found genuinely funny. He realized he found me attractive and decided then and there, yeah, okay, I'll pick her. A month later, we were officially together. I asked him if he loved me. His response? I would marry you. Doesn't that answer it? It didn't. I pressed him, desperate to understand what I meant to him, but his answers only left me more confused. Was this his version of love? Was it even possible for him to love me the way I loved him? When I told him I needed time to process everything, he left without argument or protest. It hit me then, he genuinely didn't care. Or maybe he cared in his own way, but not in a way I could recognize or understand. Now, I'm stuck in a whirlwind of emotions. I love him, that much I know. But can I live with this? Can I be with someone who chose me out of convenience rather than passion? Someone who views relationships as logical decisions rather than emotional connections? I feel embarrassed that I didn't see it earlier, that I missed the signs. Looking back, the clues were there. His coldness at times, his ability to adapt seamlessly to any situation, his lack of emotional depth in certain moments. But I ignored them because I wanted to believe in the version of him I fell for. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to stay and see where this goes, to accept him for who he is and hope that's enough. But another part of me wonders if I'm setting myself up for heartbreak. For now, I'm leaving these thoughts here, hoping they'll help me make sense of it all.